Welcome back. Now, for decades, the shrinking of Lake Chad has been a major ecological and humanitarian crisis threatening millions of people across Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and also Cameroon, who rely on the lake for water, agriculture, and also fishing. Now, once one of Africa's largest lakes, it has shrunk by over 90% since the 1960s due to climate change, irregular water usage, and also desertification. Now, there's a glimmer of hope because the African Development Bank has approved funding for a critical feasibility study to explore ways of recharging Lake Chad. Now, this announcement was made during the pre-forum joint press briefing at the 5th Lake Chad Governors Forum in Maiduguri. Our correspondent Umaru Kirawa has been following this story closely, and he brought us this report from over the week. Take a look.
From the top, a view of the Lake Chad, a major water source for millions in the Sahel region. It serves as economic multiplier and means of survival for families depending on fishing and irrigation farming. The Lake Chad Basin, which is said to have witnessed significant shrinkage over the past decades due to climate change and unsustainable water use, is showing signs of recovery according to recent research.
2014, right up till now, we will say the lake is regaining the surface area. So as of last year, we had 16 to 17,000 square kilometers of waters in the lake. Now, there are details that we can share, but we are monitoring the surface area of the lake. I'm happy to announce we just recently got approved funding from the African Development Bank to conduct the feasibility studies for this project. The project was approved in November, and we are starting implementation this year. So we are going to do feasibility studies to do the improvement of the hydraulic capacity of the Shari and Logun system and of the Maiduguri Bay, and also of the lake. So those studies are going to start. And we hope once this is done, then we're going to come up with an investment plan which the countries are going to support in terms of dredging and making sure that the lake is reconstituted.
This is said to form a major part of discussion by experts as governors of the 8 states in the 4 Lake Chad countries of Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and Cameroon, as well as policy makers, among others, converge for the 5th Lake Chad Governors Forum.
Day 1 will begin with an in-depth analysis of current security and humanitarian trends in the Lake Chad region. It will be followed by a review of the regional strategy for stabilization, recovery, and resilience, where stakeholders will explore updated strategies and implementation tools and the funding mechanism enriched by insights from traditional rulers and expert discussions. Key initiatives include the stabilization of development plan will also be launched, underlying the importance of resource mobilization for sustainable peace building.
Hosted by Yobe State Government, the 5th Lake Chad Governors Forum is a platform to strengthen regional cooperation and address pressing challenges in the Lake Chad Basin, including stabilization, recovery, and resilience. In Maiduguri for News Central, Umaru Kirawa.
Many thanks to Umaru Kirawa there for that report. But it begs to ask a critical question. What does this mean in real terms? Can science and policy reverse decades of environmental decline? Well, to unpack this, we'll speak to our correspondent, Umaru Kirawa, who's been following this story closely. He joins us now live all the way from Maiduguri, Borno. Also joining us here as well is Mrs. Dr. Murtala Adogi Mohammed. He's the founder and CEO of System Strategy and Policy Lab. He's going to help us understand the broader implications of this move. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us. We appreciate you for doing this with us. I'm going to start with Umaru. Umaru, good morning to you. I mean, you covered this announcement from Maiduguri. You followed the forum, the Governors Forum, which is the 5th one, consecutive one. Can you walk us through what was said at the pre-forum briefing and why this feasibility study is being seen as a breakthrough?
Well, I asked the question when they were briefing the press with regard to the line of activities that will take place during the 5th Lake Chad Governors Forum, which has successfully concluded yesterday, and they have even issued a communique with regard to what really needs to be done in terms of regional stabilization, recovery, resilience, deliberate efforts to address some of the teething problem in the region. So the technical director of the Lake Chad Basin Commission made the pronouncement when I asked the question with regard to the state of recharging of the Lake Chad, which is in a state of comatose and which has really led to the destruction of lives, properties, the increase in terrorism and other humanitarian crises. So many people are dependent on the Lake Chad for fishing, for farming, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, the crisis, the Boko Haram crisis, and the ISWAP, among other terrorist groups in the region, affected the basin. And of course, the shrinkage of the Lake Chad has been yesterday's discussion by researchers, by policy makers, and even regional leaders, and even the leadership of the 4 countries of Chad, Niger, Cameroon, with regard to looking into the possibilities of recharging the Lake Chad. But unfortunately, there were only words, and there were no real commitment with regard to actually recharging the Lake Chad or addressing the shrinkage of the Lake Chad. And happily, the technical director of the Lake Chad Basin Commission announced that the African Development Bank has recently made approval with regard to looking into the possibilities of feasibility studies to maybe recharging the Lake Chad, and he said that the Lake Chad is even regaining its waters. So the feasibility study will really set pathway for either the recharge of the Lake Chad or the dredging of available areas in the Lake Chad, so as to really explore the potentials of the Lake Chad, because if the government do not take deliberate steps to address this issue, it's another disaster. And unfortunately, it's an issue of leadership, because we can take cue from Dubai. They had the first man-made island, the Palm Jumeirah Island, which the project, I think within the span of 6 years, they were able to establish a man-made island. They had to bring water and so on and so forth. They had to construct houses, hotels, and so on and so forth. The place is now a tourism center for Nigerians and people across the Lake Chad and others across the globe, which is very unfortunate for us in the Lake Chad. We had everything, yet we don't have everything.
Okay, now Umaru,
so
just
there is
Umaru,
so much to take deliberate steps to work on this.
Let's try and talk to Dr. Mohammed here. First off, Umaru, thank you very much. Now, regarding this being a feasibility study, I don't know how much hope this brings, because feasibility studies are often what they are, studies. It could go well, and you could decide, no, this is not going to be profitable. There are financial implications. There are political implications. There are much more than we can that we can imagine. So, Dr. Mohammed, I don't know what you think about this. First, if you can explain what they mean by feasibility studies, and in what sense do they mean feasibility?
Okay, thank you. Good morning once again. Thank you so much for the great opportunity to be part of this conversation. I think the feasibility study is to look at the social aspects, the economic aspect, the environmental aspect, and the cultural aspect, the livelihood aspect that has to do with people around Lake Chad, and look at what would be the likely effect of the recharging Lake Chad. Now, let me give you a good example. In a situation whereby we recharge Lake Chad, where we create a channel of water from other African countries, maybe DRC, maybe Niger, maybe Cameroon, maybe Nigeria, we channel water down to Lake Chad, then what will be the effect, with the impact of climate change? If there is increase in the iceland of water availability, if there is increase in the melting of the ice, which also invariably increase the water volume at the Atlantic Ocean, which now flow down to Lake Chad, there's a possibility we will likely experience another flood that may affect people. So feasibility study will help us to understand that at what magnitude, at what size do we really need to recharge Lake Chad? The water is shrinking from 25,000 square kilometer size of water in 1960 to 2,000 square kilometer size of water now. So like about 80% of Lake Chad site has gone completely. So if we are recharging it, how do we recharge it? Where are we going to get the water to recharge Lake Chad? What is the size of the recharging that may not likely lead to flood again that may now affect people? So the feasibility study will tell us how much do we need and how are we going to finance it, even though the representative of the African Development Bank President Additional, Dr. Baldet, said they are going to finance it under their infrastructural component of African Development Bank. So feasibility study will help us to know the financing aspect, the cost that we may likely spend, how much do we need, then the ecological effect, the environmental effect, the social effect, the political implication, and the security aspect and the livelihood. So, but my own suggestion here is that if really we want to understand the dynamics around the Lake Chad, the feasibility study should also focus on the basic needs of the people, the children, the women, the young people, the youth. And also the feasibility study should also focus on understanding the nexus between humanitarian aspect, development aspect, and the peace building. In the past 15 years of the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast Nigeria and the part of Lake Chad, we spent billions of dollars in the last 15 years. But up till now, there is no study, no evaluation report. I've clearly stated how much we spend on humanitarian aspect, how much we spend on development, and how much we spend in building peace. So apart from the feasibility study of looking at recharging Lake Chad, we also need to know, where is this money going? Is it the IDP camps, the humanitarian? Is it development, rebuilding a primary school, construction of schools? Or is it rebuilding peace? Peace is not free anywhere in the world. You need to pay before you remain peaceful anywhere. And that pay may not be necessarily paying people literally, but engaging people, empowering people economically and socially, lifting people out of poverty, most especially young people, most especially women that bear the brunt of impact of climate change. So I think these are some of the things that we need to consider when doing the feasibility study. But the feasibility study also should bear in mind the role of critical stakeholders, that they need to come on board to contribute. The people that have the local knowledge, because at times when we conduct feasibility study, we have more of an international experts doing the studies. But at times, by the time they finish the study, it becomes contextually blind. When we say the report of feasibility study is contextually blind, it means it did not cover the interest of the locals, the indigenous people in the Chad of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon.
Dr. Mohammed.
And the people from the 8 states that cover this region, their context of culture, norms, value, beliefs, traditions, and the way of life is very important.
Right.
Because if you look at the driver of this crisis, it's basically poverty in the last 15 years. What have you done to lift people out of poverty?
Dr. Mohammed, thank you. As we're talking about the risk and things to factor into, I want to also to put into focus is, one thing about large-scale water restoration or any large-scale project that is community-based and for the community, there always seem to be some sort of hold-up, right? So I have to ask whether it's they face political, financial, or technical difficulties. But another issue there is risks as well. And so I have to ask you, what are the biggest risks that could delay a visibility study such as this? Just besides, the people or taking the people along, there are other critical ones I'd like for you to talk about, politically or technical.
Yeah, I think in every feasibility study or in every restoration of either land or water, there's what we call risk. And the best way to go is to develop what we call risk mitigation strategies. So the risk mitigation strategy, we might have an environmental risk. Maybe we might say we should delay the feasibility study until during rainy season. So that might delay the feasibility study. That's environmental risk. The political risk might be when the feasibility study might happen during election. We must say let's delay till after election to have the new government in place that we have a very strong political will. Then another risk might be the technical risk. Hiring and assembling the experts to conduct the feasibility study, the recruitment process of African Development Bank, the procurement process of experts might also delay it. Then we have the economic risk. The economic risk is that I was at the summit, I was at the forum in the last 3 days. I was in Maiduguri, and I participated in almost all the session. When the African Development Bank made the commitment, I was waiting to hear the amount of money they are willing to invest, either tactically, I don't know, maybe Kirawa will help me later. I did not hear the amount of money mentioned. So African Development Bank said they are going to finance the recharging of Lake Chad, but they did not tell us how much they are going to spend. So the economic risk here might be the Minister of Finance of Niger, of Nigeria, of Cameroon, and of Chad might likely pay a contributing fee. We don't know yet. So if African Development Bank is going to finance this 100%, then maybe we might not face economic risk. But if African Development Bank will now finance 80% and ask the government of Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and Cameroon to contribute 20%, then we might likely have a delay there. So that is not clear. So I think there is good for follow-up meeting with the Minister of Finance, Minister of Budget and Planning of Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and Cameroon, with African Development Bank and the Lake Chad Development Commission to clearly understand when you say you are going to finance the recharging of Lake Chad, what do you mean? That will give them the sense of the financing aspect and the mechanism of the contribution of the financing. I think that might help. And all the risks I've mentioned, the political risks, economic risks, environmental risks, and also the political risks, all the risks, by the time the technical experts sit together and analyze this, that will give us the clear sense of when we should expect the recharging of Lake Chad should commence.
Okay, then.
Thank you.
Dr. Mohammed, thank you very much. Kirawa, real quick, you have to summarize for me here. Dr. Mohammed asked the question, did you hear of any sum that would be invested by the African Development Bank into this project?
We've not heard of any amount with regard to the project, the feasibility studies. We were not allowed for follow-up at that time. I was very keen because it's a project that has been on the front burner for yesteryears, which is many experts, in fact, attribute it to one of the reasons that lead to the exacerbation of the terrorism in the Lake Chad region. So the government, regional leaders, and of course the Lake Chad Basin Commission and the African Development Bank really need to match words with action. Let's see these commitments into reality so that this problem of insecurity, the climate change, the humanitarian crisis
and Kirawa,
will evaporate anytime soon.
Kirawa, based on what you've just said, when does it look like this will be implemented based on everything that was discussed at the forum? From what you saw, does it seem like this would be the next year, the next 5 years? Or when would the feasibility studies be concluded so that action would be taken?
Well, for now, based on information we have at hand, is the approval has been made by the African Development Bank. But with regard to the timeline, they have not told us anything with regard to the timeline of the feasibility study. But they say it will commence this year.
Okay.
And there's one thing as certain, we also have to put into this conversation climate change. Hopefully we can have this another time, because climate change continues to be a driving factor, one of the contributing factors, if not the contributing factor to this desertification and why people are leaving, and so, should government focus more on mitigation strategies rather than, a huge, large-scale water restoration project? Is this? Only time will tell. But gentlemen, many thanks for doing this with us. Umaru Kirawa, correspondent from News Central Television, and also Dr. Murtala Adogi Mohammed is the founder and CEO, System Strategy and Policy Lab. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.